Have you ever felt that the history you were taught, the narratives presented as complete, were somehow lacking? That beneath the polished surface of international relations and celebrated anniversaries, there lay deeper, perhaps more unsettling truths? We are often guided through carefully curated corridors of the past, shown only what serves a particular story. But the human spirit, in its relentless quest for understanding, yearns for the full picture, for the uncomfortable realities that shape our present. What if the chronicles of nations of continents held secrets that, once revealed, could alter our perception of progress, of power, and of justice itself? Beneath the surface of history, there are truths that demand to be heard. These are the untold stories of France's impact on Africa. For generations, these narratives have been whispered in hushed tones, confined to academic circles, or simply erased from mainstream discourse. But the echoes of the past do not fade easily. They resonate in the economic structures, the political landscapes, and the very identities of nations across an entire continent. It is time to amplify these echoes, to bring them into the light, not out of malice, but out of a profound need for clarity and a more complete understanding of the forces that have shaped our world. Join me, Fidelis Agbor, as we embark on a journey through time, peeling back the layers of official accounts and diplomatic niceties. We will confront uncomfortable facts, examine the enduring legacies of decisions made decades, even centuries ago, and seek to understand the intricate, often painful relationship between a European power and the diverse nations of Africa. This is not merely an academic exercise, it is an exploration of the very foundations upon which our contemporary world is built. A quest for the truths they don't often teach you, but which are essential for a just and equitable future. Imagine a vast continent, rich in culture, diverse in its peoples, and self-sustaining in its economies. Then, picture the arrival of powerful forces from across the sea, driven by an insatiable hunger for resources and dominion. During the 19th and 20th centuries, France carved out an immense colonial empire across West and Central Africa, imposing its will upon millions. This was not a gentle assimilation. It was a conquest, a subjugation that redrew maps, rewrote laws, and irrevocably altered the destiny of countless communities. The tricolor flag, a symbol of liberty, equality, and fraternity in one land, often cast a long, oppressive shadow over another, heralding an era of profound and painful transformation for the African continent. The machinery of colonial rule was relentless and brutal. Indigenous systems of governance, trade, and social organization developed over centuries were systematically dismantled or co-opted to serve French interests. In their place, racial hierarchies were rigidly enforced, creating a deeply stratified society where the color of one's skin determined one's rights and opportunities. Vast populations were subjected to forced labor, toiling under harsh conditions to extract rubber, timber, cotton, and minerals, wealth that flowed north, enriching the colonizer while depleting the colonized. This exploitation was not an unfortunate byproduct. It was the very engine of the colonial enterprise, a calculated system designed for maximum extraction at immense human cost. The consequences of this era of exploitation are not confined to history books. They are etched into the very fabric of modern African nations. The arbitrary borders drawn by colonial powers sowed seeds of future conflict, dividing ethnic groups and lumping historic rivals together. The destruction of indigenous agricultural practices and the imposition of cash crop economies led to food insecurity and long-term economic devastation, creating dependencies that would linger long after the flags of independence were raised. The psychological scars, too, run deep, a legacy of lost autonomy and suppressed identity that continues to shape the post-colonial experience. Understanding this foundation is crucial to comprehending the complexities that followed. The story of colonialism is often sanitized, presented as a period of benign tutelage or inevitable progress, but beneath this veneer lie chapters of unspeakable violence, events that have been deliberately obscured or minimized, yet continue to haunt the collective memory of those who endured them. These are not mere footnotes in history, they are profound traumas, acts of brutality that reveal the true cost of empire. To ignore them is to misunderstand the depth of the wounds inflicted and the enduring distrust that such actions inevitably breed. These events are stark reminders that the pursuit of power can lead to the abandonment of humanity. Consider the Thiaroye massacre of 1944. West African soldiers, having fought valiantly for France in World War II, demanded the back pay and demobilization allowances they were rightfully owed. Instead of recognition for their service, they were met with bullets. French colonial troops opened fire on these unarmed veterans, men who had risked their lives for a nation that then betrayed them so cruelly. And then there is the Algerian War, a brutal conflict marked by widespread torture, summary executions, and forced disappearances at the hands of French forces. The methods employed were systematic and horrific, designed to crush the Algerian quest for independence through sheer terror, leaving scars that ache to this day. These atrocities were not isolated incidents but part of a broader pattern of colonial violence designed to maintain control and suppress dissent. The trauma inflicted upon individuals, families, and entire communities reverberates through generations. It fosters a deep-seated distrust, not only of the former colonizer, but of power structures that seem to echo those oppressive systems. The memories of Thiaroye, of the countless unnamed victims of the Algerian War, and other similar events, serve as a somber testament to the violence inherent in the colonial project. Acknowledging these dark chapters is a painful but necessary step towards any genuine reconciliation. When the overt chains of colonial rule were formally broken, many believed true independence had dawned. Yet, subtle, more insidious mechanisms of control often remained, woven into the very economic fabric of newly sovereign nations. One of the most enduring and controversial of these is the CFA franc. Created in 1945, initially standing for Colonies Françaises d'Afrique, its name later changed, but its fundamental structure and its ties to France have persisted, raising profound questions about economic sovereignty for the 14 African nations that still use it today. Is it a tool for stability, as its proponents claim, or a sophisticated instrument of continued dependence? The mechanics of the CFA franc system are complex, but at its core lies a critical link to the French treasury. These African nations are, by treaty, required to deposit a significant percentage of their foreign exchange reserves into an operations account managed by France. In return, France guarantees the convertibility of the CFA franc. While this arrangement might offer a veneer of monetary stability, critics argue it severely restricts the economic autonomy of these African countries. Their monetary policies are effectively tethered to the European Central Bank, via France, limiting their ability to respond to local economic conditions, devalue their currency to boost exports, or utilize their reserves for national development projects as they see fit. The consequences of this system are far-reaching and fiercely debated. Proponents highlight low inflation and a stable currency, but detractors point to a stifling of industrial growth, a discouragement of trade between African nations themselves, and a perpetual outflow of capital towards Europe. It creates a situation where economic decisions vital to the well-being of millions of Africans are influenced, if not dictated, by priorities set in Paris and Frankfurt. This financial umbilical cord perpetuates a form of dependence, a subtle but powerful echo of the colonial era, ensuring that economic destinies remain intertwined, often to the disadvantage of the African partners. The term Francafrique evokes a shadowy world of intrigue, a complex web of political, economic, and military ties that France has maintained with its former African colonies long after their formal independence. It speaks of an era, and some argue a continuing reality, where French influence permeates the highest levels of African governance, often to the detriment of democratic development and genuine sovereignty. This is not the transparent diplomacy of equal partners, but a more opaque system of patronage, secret deals, and at times overt intervention, all designed to protect French strategic and economic interests on the continent. It's a game played in the corridors of power, often far from public scrutiny. The methods of Francafrique have been diverse and, critics contend, deeply damaging. France has been accused, credibly in many instances, of propping up autocratic regimes that served its interests, even as those regimes oppressed their own people. Dictators like Omar Bongo of Gabon, who ruled for decades, or Hissène Habre of Chad, later convicted of crimes against humanity, enjoyed close relationships with Paris. There have been allegations of French involvement in coups d'état, the arming of favored factions in civil conflicts, and the subtle, or not-so-subtle influencing of electoral outcomes. The objective, consistently, has appeared to be the safeguarding of access to critical resources, oil, uranium, cocoa, coffee, and the maintenance of a sphere of influence in a strategically vital region. This persistent interference has had a corrosive effect on African political landscapes. It has undermined democratic institutions, fostered corruption, and created a culture of impunity for leaders who knew they could count on French backing as long as they towed the line. While France has often portrayed its interventions as necessary for stability or humanitarian reasons, the underlying currents of Francafrique suggest a more self-serving agenda. The legacy is one of distorted political development, where the will of the people could be, and often was, overridden by the strategic calculations of a former colonial power, ensuring that the chains of influence, though less visible, remained firmly in place. The 1994 Rwandan genocide stands as one of the darkest moments in modern history, a horrifying explosion of violence where nearly 1 million people, overwhelmingly Tutsis, were systematically slaughtered in just 100 days. The world watched, largely inactive, but the role of some external actors has come under intense scrutiny, and among them, France's actions before, during and after the genocide have raised profound and deeply troubling questions. It is a chapter fraught with pain, denial, and a slow, arduous path towards acknowledging a share of responsibility for a catastrophe of unimaginable proportions. Evidence, including a recent comprehensive report commissioned by the French government itself, points to France's significant and persistent support for the Hutu-led government of Juvenal Habyarimana, even as the extremist ideology that would fuel the genocide was taking root and spreading. This support was not merely diplomatic, it extended to military training, arms supplies, and political backing. Critics argue that France, blinded by its geopolitical interests and a desire to maintain its influence in the region, failed to recognize or chose to ignore the warning signs of impending mass violence. Accusations persist that French officials were aware of the preparations for the genocide but did little to prevent it, and in some instances may have inadvertently or directly empowered those who would become its architects. During the genocide itself, France launched Operation Turquoise, a military intervention ostensibly for humanitarian purposes. However, this operation has been heavily criticized for allegedly creating a safe zone that allowed some perpetrators of the genocide to escape justice, and for its delayed and limited impact in halting the killings. The scars of this period are immeasurable, not only for Rwanda, but for the conscience of the international community. While recent years have seen a shift, with French President Emmanuel Macron acknowledging France's heavy and overwhelming responsibilities, the full extent of its role, and the path to true reconciliation, remain subjects of intense debate and profound sorrow for the victims and survivors. While the era of tricolor flags flying over African capitals has passed, the economic dynamics established during colonial times often persist, albeit in more contemporary guises. We must ask ourselves, has genuine economic independence truly been achieved when the wealth of a continent continues to flow predominantly outwards, enriching foreign corporations and nations, while many African countries remain mired in poverty? This is the uncomfortable reality of what many describe as extractive neo-colonial economic relations, a system where the patterns of resource exploitation and unequal benefit stubbornly endure, long after the political shackles were supposedly cast off. Across Africa, French corporations, some with deep historical roots in the colonial era, continue to dominate key sectors of the economy. Think of energy, where giants like Total Energies have vast operations extracting oil and gas. Consider transport and logistics, where companies like Ballor have historically controlled ports and railways. Look at infrastructure projects, often financed and built by French firms. While investment and business are in themselves not inherently negative, the terms of these engagements often come under scrutiny. Are the contracts fair? Is there genuine technology transfer? Do local communities truly benefit? Or are these arrangements structured to maximize profit extraction for the foreign entity, with limited long-term development for the host nation? The result too often is a continuation of the colonial paradigm, Africa as a source of raw materials and cheap labor, and a market for finished goods, rather than a hub of diversified industrial production and innovation. Wealth generated from African resources disproportionately benefits shareholders and economies abroad, while the environmental and social costs are borne locally. This creates a cycle of dependence where African nations struggle to build robust, self-sufficient economies because the terms of engagement in the global market remain skewed. It is a subtle yet powerful form of neo-colonialism, where economic leverage achieves what military force once did, perpetuating imbalances that demand our urgent attention. We have journeyed through shadowed corridors of history, unearthing narratives that are often uncomfortable, challenging, and deeply unsettling. The legacy of France's engagement in Africa is a complex tapestry, woven with threads of ambition, exploitation, and enduring consequences that stretch into our present day. To confront these truths is not to assign blame simplistically, nor is it to dwell endlessly on the grievances of the past. Rather, it is to understand the intricate forces that have shaped nations, economies, and human lives, and to recognize how these historical currents continue to influence the world we inhabit. The weight of this history is immense, felt in the economic disparities, the political fragilities, and the societal traumas that persist across the African continent. But ignoring these realities, or cloaking them in euphemisms, serves no one in the long run. True progress, genuine partnership, and mutual respect can only be built upon a foundation of acknowledged truth. It requires courage from all sides, the courage to speak of past injustices, the courage to listen without defensiveness, and the courage to envision a future free from the shackles of historical exploitation and interference. This understanding is the first step towards healing and transformation. History's shadows are long, but truth brings light. Only by facing these realities, by engaging in honest and open dialogue about the full scope of France's impact on Africa, can we hope for justice and reconciliation. This is not just about rewriting history books, it is about reshaping the future, ensuring that the relationships between nations are built on equity, respect, and a shared commitment to human dignity. The path forward requires a collective will to learn from the past, however painful, to ensure that such legacies are never repeated.